Hello everyone, welcome to the Vivienne as a fantastic little flower girl special occasion dress with a bubble hem. So here I'm going to go through and show you how you can create a bubble hem that won't be out of place at any posh occasion. I've also made a little alteration on the sleeve, so you've got something coming over a little bit further, which I think is very cute. It's almost like a cap sleeve, not quite. If you went way further it would be a cap sleeve, and I'm going to show you how you can do that. That little technique for that. And also I've sewn on some roses afterwards. You can get them by the meter, they're not terribly expensive, you don't even need a meter for this. And then you stitch them to the front and you stitch them all the way around, giving you this beautiful finish at the back. And I'm always lining, whoops, I don't go anywhere. And I'm always lining with something a little bit funky because kids like to get in it if it's a little bit funky. And also what I really like about this is it's cotton next to the skin. The last thing you want is some satin. It looks great on a skirt and it's rustly and it's brilliant, but not for the top. So wherever skin is touched, I don't do that. So let's see how you can adapt it to make some little cup sleeves and how you sew a dress with a bubble hem. For this dress I've used, like I said, the roses by the meter. They're very cheap and cheerful, but they look super. We need a concealed zip, 30 centimeters will do, some dupion silk for the top, and I've used some taffeta for the skirt, and it's got some structure to it already, which I think is very pretty. And then you need matching thread and some satin, and we also need some interlining and lining. For the pattern you need the sleeveless pattern for the Vivienne dress, so the center panels and the side panels, and you can do the tabs if you like. I in the end left them off. And for the skirt you will need the plain circle skirt and the box pleated circle skirt, but in this case we're just going to gather it all. I'm cutting this off. This is going to be my lining, but if you wanted the skirt to be a bit longer, leave that and just lengthen the one that has the box pleats on, and then never cut anything away. Put it all in a nice folder so you can add it back to later. And here we have the outer skirt turned up so that you don't see the seam. Next we're going to lengthen the shoulder a little bit to create a little bit of a drop shoulder or a little cap for the arm, which I think might be quite nice. You can play around with that. So you just draw out what you think would look good, and then you just simply cut it out. Now this here is my center front piece, and of course I now need to transfer this equally to the back piece, so you want to draw around it, and then you can cut that one out as well, and you know it's both going to be exactly the same. You might want to pin this as well and then put it over your child. You could do a scalloped edge around here, and that would be really, really pretty, I think. So I get from one idea to the next. And then because we have got this drop shoulder, we can make the neckline a little bit bigger, and I think for an occasion dress that is actually a really nice thing to do. So I'm going over 1 centimeter and easing it into the neckline. I'm not going lower because that would be too much. And then I'm transferring that piece of paper over to my back and draw a mark there, draw it down so that I've reduced the shoulder equally in the front and the back, otherwise it won't fit. I'm using a dupion silk and I'm creating a fold. Just fold over as much as you need to get out the front and your tabs, if that's what you're using. I left my tabs off in the end, but this is just to show you how little fabric you use when you cut out like that. It's the best way. Takes a bit longer, but come on, you're saving a lot. Now if you've got a silk with a shine to it in a direction, then you want to make sure that you cut your pieces all in the same direction. So here it's a little bit more wasteful, but still this is all that's left over, and you could do a bow or whatever. You just keep it all neatly in your little scrap box. And here you can see how much is left over from 1/2 meter of fabric. So really that bodice took only 1/4 meter for the age 4 to 5. Next we're going to cut an interlining or a mount. That is to give some substance to the silk, which might fray and is also not that stable. So I'm cutting that and my lining, which goes against the body at the same time. Make sure that you really do put your center pieces on the fold. And you should end up in the front with 3 pieces. So you've got lining, interlining and shell fabric. And then of course 6 for all the other ones, 3 for each side. The skirt is cut on the fold in the front here. And then for the back, you've got one side from one corner and the other side from the other corner. So first we're going to cut the center front. So fold your fabric over and cut that one out. And then I fold my fabric over again to cut the other ones out. And for the lining, I've put my fabric selvage on selvage, so it's on the fold, and then I fold it over again so that I can cut the whole circle in one go. Open out your circle and then cut where you have the straight grain. You want to cut your fabric. Skirt done. Let's get started with our sewing. First thing to do is to place the interlining underneath all the silk pieces. In some instructions I say sew around it, but to be honest it tends to pucker and makes it harder. So just put them underneath your shell fabric and then use it as if it's one piece of fabric. And the first step here is to put together the bodice. So you put the side panels with the right sides facing on the center panels and you sew those together. And then the seam allowances of the lining face the side seam. The seam allowances of the shell face the center back and center front. Iron out your seam snippet and then iron it towards the center of the body. And that gives you a really clean finish. There's no tightness there. We're also closing the shoulder, and because it's round, you need to snip that as well. And then we're going to iron that. You can also cut it back a little bit more if you like. So I'm using the end of my little sleeve ironing board to get the curve really nicely done. And then I'm also ironing it from the outside to make sure that it stays how it needs to be. Next, we're going to put the lining right sides facing onto the outside of the bodice, and we're going to close the armhole and the neckline, and we're starting 3 centimeters from the center back and then stopping 3 centimeters in front of the center back. I'm also using some stay tape, which somebody said, what do you mean China tape? Get stay tape from Joann's. And this shows how old I am. I had no idea that you could just buy that, and I did, and it's absolutely brilliant. It has no bulk, and it makes sure that your armholes don't stretch. So as you sew this in, when you get to the point in the armhole where you're going to have that peak because it's coming out to the rounded part, there you need to have your needle in your fabric, you fold over that stay tape and then you follow it all the way around the curve. You can actually for the armhole use foot width seam allowance as well. It doesn't really make any difference if that's easier for you to follow it round, because at the point here where you have the tip, it's not so easy to know where do you stop. So if you're not quite sure, you could always mark that with a pencil or chalk before you even start. Fold over your tape again, and then we're just going to the end. Next, we're going to cut back our seam allowances all the way, in the neckline, but please not there where the zip goes in. You need to leave that standing, obviously. With that done, we are now also cutting to the quick where we need to turn the fabric, because otherwise it'll be all puckered in that area. So you also want to snip all curves really well. And if you wanted to, you could understitch a little bit where the underarm is. You can't go very far, but you could do that. Then put a safety pin in and pull the back through to the front. And that's it basically. All we have to do now is press the bodice really, really neatly. And you roll the fabric towards the top so that none of it shows through. If I didn't have the roses to go on after, I would be very tempted to pipe this. just so I have a really pristine neckline. And then we close the side seam, and we do that as ever in one go. So lining on top of lining, shell on top of shell, just open it out and sew all the way across. Now we're going to iron the seam flat. That's quite important when you're working with silks. Iron it flat first, then apart, and also you get a little bit of tightness when you close this. So you want to snip the seam allowance on either side here so that there is no tightness. And then you fold over your shell, over your lining, and you can press it again, and it gives you the most pristine finish around your armhole. Bodice is done. Right, let's do our little skirt. First we want to close the center back and the side seams of the outer layer. So mark where the zip is going to go. Take your lining. That just has one seam, but we want to make sure that we close it to the same point. That's the point where the zip goes in. So my pin was in the wrong place there. Just moved it. And I'm sewing them all too. Now I'm working with polyester here, and if you iron polyester with very high heat, it might very well melt. So use an ironing cloth that you've got to put over the top so that you can iron with really high heat, and so that your seams are nice and crisp and pristine and will stay where they need to stay. Then you mark your lining skirt and your skirt in the 4 places. That is the center back, opposite the center back, and then half of that. And you guessed it, we're going to start at the center back, and we're going to put together the outer edge of the skirt. And of course the inner lining is a lot shorter, which will pull up the skirt. And it's also not as wide. So we're putting all the markings on top of each other, and then we're actually going in there, pick up the center of that and put that on the center of your satin. And with that done, we can go to the sewing machine and we can sew this together. Make sure that you sew from the lining side. It's really hard to sew it from the other side, and just put pleats in where they need to be. It does not have to be very tidy, but you do have to catch them all. So make sure that you do. So check underneath it that nothing slips or anything. And that is your first line, which holds the whole skirt together and which makes the outer skirt already reduced in width. And some people really like that already as a bobber. That's it. I don't want it any more bubbly than that. I keep it like that. It's absolutely beautiful. Or you can say, nope, I'm going to put some elastic over the top now. And in order to do that, you need to identify how wide you want the whole skirt to be, and that's what you gather it to. So in my case, I'm just saying, well, this is about right. That's what I like. I think you want some movement room here as well. And then you can quarter that and you can put that on to your skirt. But it actually is, if I stretch the elastic as much as it will go, then that's just about right. So I took my pins back out and just stretched it, and it just ended up being exactly the right amount. And if it was a little bit tighter, it wouldn't have done any harm either. So just take your elastic and stretch it quite a lot, or as much as it will go. And you stitch it on with a triple zigzag stitch. And that's it. Look at that. And really, really gathered it in again. And it will give you that beautiful hem. Next, we're going to put some gather threads in the top, and I'm using a cheaper yellow thread at the bottom, so I don't get confused, and the more expensive Gutermann thread for the top, because the last thing you want is for it to rip, because then you have to do it all again. So for the thread that you want to pull, it's advisable to use like a better one, and then for the lower one, the cheaper one. Next, we can put the outer layer on top of the skirt and we can sew it on. So all you have to do is basically put the side seams on top of each other and then distribute your gathers really, really well. And then you can sew it on. When I'm sewing it on, I'm still arranging my gathers again. So I don't ever do it like perfect when I'm pinning it, because I know I will like rearrange them anyway a little bit. Make sure that you don't catch anything underneath it. Keep checking under that nothing has pushed and is going to get caught. And then when you've done it, you want to check all the way around. Have I caught anything? And if not, remove your gather threads. And we can now put the lining to the lining of the bodice and start at the center back. Put the center back, bodice and lining on top of each other like that, and then you start pinning from there. And some people just like think this feels so wrong, but it's so right. So what you do is you just keep pulling it and pulling it out and pinning it until you get to the other side. It is like a twisted sausage. Keep pinning, and then you sew it on. And again, this is I would say probably the most fiddly part of doing a dress like that is to pull that through. The rest of it is all fairly straightforward. Don't think you're doing it wrong. You are doing it right. Now all I have to do is pull, look, and it's all straight again. Next step is to put the zip in. We know we need a concealed zip, and the right side goes on the left side first. And we're going to do 2 rows of stitching, one on the edge and then the one that actually sews it in. And I'm not going to show that here again because you have got that beautiful video from me from the workshop that shows it all. Make sure that you snip the skirt so that it's not too thick when you put it in. Do up your zip, check it, then roll back the lining, roll over your zip there. I love that technique. It's so easy and it looks really cool. Cut back your zip and voila, beautiful. All done. Next, we're just going to pin the lining to the zip. And then again, we're just going to sew that in. And the final step now is to attach your roses to the edge. And it's really important that you have the same amount of roses from the center front to the back. So it is really advisable to just decide, do you want a half a rose at the center front, or do you want one either side of the center front? I do either side here, and then you put a pin in there and you arrange them all the way around. Double thread, and now I'm going to work away all that netting and stitch them on, trying to not catch the lining but just the interlining. The key to this is to go in the same place that you just came out so that there is no thread visible, and it doesn't have to be tidy. People always think, oh, is there a certain system or something? No, there isn't. You just go along and you try to do it so that the thread isn't visible and that the roses are attached and none of the netting can be seen. And I actually had to sit down for that. I could not do that for the camera because you do need a bit more control. And then with the one side on, you can see nothing is visible. I am now going through the top. And here I'm kind of tunneling through the edge of the neckline and then picking up a little bit of my rose and stitching it too. And so I work my way all the way around, and if there's netting, I push it in so that it can't be seen when the dress is finished. Thank you again for watching one of my videos. It's always a pleasure to make these, and I'm so glad so many of you are enjoying them too. There's so many more things coming up for the Vivienne, from skirts to tops to goodness knows. This is not the end. So thank you very much for watching, and I see you soon again.